Have you ever wondered why you automatically reach for your phone the second you wake up? Or, why some people can just stick to a gym routine no problem, while for others it's a constant struggle? Well, it all comes down to habits. And in his fantastic book, The Power of Habit, Charles Duhigg takes us on this incredible journey into the science of how they're formed. We're going to explore how we can not just understand our habits, but actually get a handle on them to change our lives for the better.
So Duhigg's big idea is that habits are kind of like the invisible architecture of our lives. And if we can understand that architecture, we can actually rebuild it. In this explainer, we're going to break his work down into three main parts. First, we'll get personal and look at our own individual habits. Then we're going to zoom out and see how these same principles shape entire organizations. And finally, we'll see how they can influence whole societies. It's pretty fascinating stuff.
All right, first up, let's pull back the curtain on our daily lives. We're going to explore the hidden forces that are secretly guiding almost everything we do.
Okay, let's kick things off with the habits of individuals. This is where we really get into the nitty-gritty of how our personal routines are formed and how they end up controlling so much of what we do day in and day out.
So, at the very heart of every single habit you have, good or bad, is something Duhigg calls the habit loop. It's this really simple three-step process that's running in our brains all the time, mostly on autopilot.
So here's how it works. It all starts with a cue. That's the trigger that tells your brain to go into automatic mode. Then comes the routine, which could be anything, physical, mental, or emotional. And finally, you get the reward, which is what helps your brain decide, hey, is this loop worth remembering for the future? Now, the real magic happens when you understand this loop, because that's when you can start to tweak it. Think about stress eating. The cue is feeling stressed. The routine is grabbing junk food. But what if you swap that routine for, say, a quick walk? You can still get a reward, that feeling of relief, and you'll have started to build a much better habit.
And get this isn't just some neat psychological trick, it's literally hardwired into our brains. See, habits are stored in a deep part of the brain called the basal ganglia, and that's what allows them to run on autopilot without us even thinking. Duhigg tells this incredible story about Eugene Pauly, a man who lost his memory due to a brain infection but could still navigate his house and find the kitchen, all because those habits were still perfectly intact. It's just a mind-blowing example of how deep these routines really run.
Okay, now here is where things get really, really interesting. Duhigg introduces this idea of a keystone habit. This is a single, powerful habit that creates a kind of domino effect of positive change across your entire life. Just think about it. When someone starts exercising regularly, what happens? Well, they often start eating better, they sleep more soundly, and they're even more productive at work. That one change sets off a chain reaction. That's a keystone habit in action.
And this isn't just for individuals either. Duhigg tells the amazing story of how Paul O'Neill completely turned around the giant aluminum company Alcoa, and he did it by focusing on one single keystone habit, worker safety. I mean, it sounds like a weird place to start, right? But by making safety the absolute #1 priority, he created this ripple effect that improved communication, boosted efficiency, and ultimately made the company way more profitable.
So what about willpower? We tend to think of it as this thing you either have or you don't, but Duhigg argues that it's actually more like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. He points to how Starbucks actually trains its employees to handle super stressful situations by having them practice self-discipline in small, manageable ways. It's a perfect example of how we can intentionally build up our willpower over time. So what is it that really makes a habit stick? Well, it's cravings. Duhigg explains that our brains get wired to crave the rewards that our habits deliver. That morning cup of coffee, it's not just a routine, is it? It's a response to a deep craving for that caffeine kick. The really cool thing, though, is that we can actually engineer new cravings to help us build better habits.
All right, so we've seen how habits work on a personal level. Now, let's zoom out and take a look at how they can shape entire organizations. In this next part, we're going to explore how smart companies use the power of habit to really drive their success.
It turns out that companies are just as reliant on habits as we are. Duhigg takes us inside some of the world's most successful businesses, like Starbucks and Target, and shows us exactly how they use habit formation to their advantage. At Starbucks, for instance, employees are trained to follow very specific routines when they're dealing with unhappy customers. And this ensures a consistent, high level of service no matter which store you walk into. And then there's Target's predictive analytics, which is, honestly, it's almost scary accurate. By tracking our shopping habits, they can figure out what we're probably going to buy next. They've gotten so good at it that they can sometimes predict huge life events, like a pregnancy, before the person's family and friends even know. It's a powerful and, a slightly unsettling example of how our habits can be used to influence our behavior.
You know, sometimes it takes a real crisis to shake an organization out of its old bad habits. Duhigg looks at the tragic King's Cross fire in the London Underground, which forced a complete and total rethinking of their safety procedures. It's a powerful reminder that these moments of crisis can actually be opportunities for profound, lasting change, both for companies and for us as individuals.
Of course, great leaders, they get this. They know how to harness the power of habit. Duhigg points to Howard Schultz at Starbucks, who built a global empire by focusing on small, repeatable habits of customer service and employee empowerment. And this brings us to another key idea, the power of small wins. By breaking down huge goals into small, manageable steps, companies like Alcoa were able to create this incredible sense of momentum that led to massive transformations.
So we've gone from individuals to organizations, and we've seen how habits can shape our lives in some really profound ways. But what about on an even bigger scale? Well, in our final section, we're going to explore how habits can actually shape entire societies.
Believe it or not, Duhigg argues that even massive social movements are driven by habits. He looks at the Montgomery bus boycotts and shows how the civil rights movement was able to succeed by tapping into the existing social habits of the community, things like church gatherings and strong friendships. It's a powerful idea that even the most revolutionary changes are often built on a foundation of everyday routines.
So all of this raises a really interesting question, doesn't it? If our habits are so automatic, are we really in control of our own lives? Duhigg dives into the science of free will here. He argues that while our habits can feel like they're running the show, we always have the power to change them. He shares these inspiring stories of people who have totally reprogrammed their lives just by taking control of their habits, which proves we're not just puppets of our routines. And finally, Duhigg looks at how social norms, basically what's considered normal, can shape our collective habits. Just take smoking, for example. I mean, just a few decades ago, it was completely normal to smoke almost anywhere. But thanks to a massive cultural shift, it's now seen as a harmful and pretty undesirable habit. It's a perfect example of how our shared beliefs can have a very real impact on our behavior.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the what and the why of habits. Now let's get to the good part, the how. In this final section, we're going to break down Duhigg's practical framework for actually changing your own habits.
And it all comes back to that habit loop we talked about at the very beginning. First, you have to identify the cue that's triggering your bad habit. Then, you need to find a new, healthier routine to replace the old one. And finally, and this is crucial, you have to make sure that the new routine gives you a reward that's just as satisfying. It's a simple, but an incredibly powerful formula for change.
And that brings us to what Duhigg calls the golden rule of habit change. And it's this: you can't just extinguish a bad habit. You can't just get rid of it. You have to replace it with a new one. That, right there, is the secret to making change actually stick.
So, what does this all mean for you? Well, it means you have the power to literally reshape your behavior and unlock a whole new level of success in your life, both personally and professionally. At the end of the day, The Power of Habit is so much more than just a book about routines. It's basically a roadmap for taking back control of your life. By understanding the simple but incredibly powerful logic of the habit loop, you can start to make small changes that will have a massive impact over time. So the real question is, what's the first habit you're going to change?